Hey everyone. Alright, so this is actually project number 3 for our celebration of the 20th anniversary of PlayStation. And while most of the other projects focus on software or, the system itself or things that haven't really been seen by the public, like the PlayStation Online CD, I wanted to use project number 3 to actually show just how much the PlayStation actually contributed to gaming in general, especially in today's environment. A lot of facts and tidbits like this can be fallen to the wayside as the years go on, but the PlayStation really was revolutionary at the time, especially in bringing ideas forward into the mainstream. That being said, let's get started. Of all the concepts we're going to talk about in this video, we're going to start with the controller as our first one. To understand just how revolutionary the PlayStation DualShock controller was, we need to go back a system, specifically to the Sega Saturn. When Sega released their 32-bit system, the controller that came with it was essentially an upgraded version of the Sega 6-button controller. Merely the same 6 buttons and the D-pad, as well as the start button, but then with 2 shoulder buttons, essentially coming from the Super Nintendo. When it came to the PlayStation controller, however, Sony added a select button, obviously from the Super Nintendo CD-ROM origins, but also moved 2 of the thumb buttons up to the shoulder area. This provided a 4-button and 4-shoulder button style controller. As crazy as it sounds 20 years later, this was actually a huge deal at the time and caused a lot of talk among the message boards and forums. Some said it was too many buttons. Some couldn't sort out how you would hold it, while others sat befuddled at Sony's choice of shapes rather than the somewhat standard alphabet. When the system finally launched, most of the concerns fell to the wayside. Problems arose, however, when a game required you to look around. This usually meant 2 of the shoulder buttons would act as up and down, or the need to hold one button while the D-pad was pressed, meaning you couldn't look and move at the same time. When Nintendo launched the N64 with its analog stick-focused controller, the beginnings of a better solution were discovered. Sony would take note and release the original dual analog controller in Japan, and later in the US, just without the rumble feature. While there are many things to discuss about, we'll simply focus on the analog sticks. Both of them. If you have ever handed a modern-day controller to a non-gamer or a casual gamer, it's a good bet it was to play a first-person shooter game. It's an even better bet that the first thing they did was look straight up at the sky while walking in circles. Believe it or not, that's how most people started out back in the day. That is, at least for the games that supported both sticks. The problem stemmed from the controller technically being an alternate accessory and not a requirement. Since every system at the time shipped with the original controller, most developers sort of hedged their bets on it. After a few months, Sony decided that they would rebuild the controller from the ground up, with rumble feature for everyone. More importantly, they not only began including the DualShock in systems, they released their Mario rival, Ape Escape, to require it. While this essentially could be viewed as a forced upgrade for the folks who had been with the systems for so long, the decision obviously worked. The DualShock ended up becoming the base design for almost every console controller going forward, regardless of company or system. Every PlayStation, Xbox system, as well as Nintendo's Wii and Wii U and their classic controllers follow the DualShock's design, give or take a few adjustments. Since we're on accessories, it's important to understand that many of the PlayStation's revolutions were never seen in America, at least not until much later on a different system. Specifically, the music genre revolution. With America, it started off with Parappa the Rapper's addictive and very catchy Simon Says-like gameplay. This would be followed up with Konami's Dance Dance Revolution series of games, where it was Simon Says but for your feet. Or hands, for us klutzes. What you didn't know was that Japan was living it up with plastic instruments of every kind. There were conductor games, dancing games, rhythm games, guitar games, DJ table games, even games that used your music CDs to create levels. Sound familiar? If you're watching this and thinking, wait, I thought Activision made the guitar games, you're half right. They did for the US market, which ended up being one of the sneakiest moves in the history of stolen ideas. You see, many of the music games that were taking Japan by storm were from Konami. Guitar Hero is essentially Konami's Guitar Freaks, but with 2 extra buttons, and then DJ Hero was just Beat Mania under a new look. This leap at an untouched market ended up reaping huge dividends for Activision, and more or less left Konami in the dust of their own creations. The only thing Konami ever remotely tried to do was release the shittiest drum kit with the shittiest game you have ever seen, and let it die quickly in the bargain bin. Konami, however, did prove one thing would become the norm as the years drew on. With the advent of hard drives and consoles, game expansions were finally able to hit the non-PC gaming community. With songs and multiplayer map purchases off of app stores, it seemed like free-flowing content had finally been brought to the living room. Except, you guessed it, the PlayStation had been doing it for a while. In America, we actually have one retail example of the expansion disc, the Grand Theft Auto London Edition. You swap it with the original GTA for all new missions and characters. Of course, in Japan, they went crazy. Konami was actually one of the biggest supporters of the expansion disc. However, they dubbed it the Append Discs. And yes, that is a great play on the word appendix, which anatomy aside means extra information on the subject matter. In this case, the append discs were usually for their musical games, like Poppin' Music, the aforementioned Guitar Freaks, Beatmania, etc. These expansion discs weren't limited to Konami's musical games either. Many other games had them. The use of the expansion discs really wouldn't be seen in America until the original Xbox and PlayStation 2, with, ironically, Rock Band's track pack discs. Now, while levels and songs are one thing, America and Japan did share in the free-flowing content from another angle: memory card saves. Subscription-based CD magazines like the PlayStation Underground allowed the downloading of custom memory card saves provided by developers or Sony themselves. This new functionality and distribution channel would eventually explode into one of the greatest community-driven projects of all time. Everyone loves to make stuff. In video games, creativity can come in the form of new user levels, new characters, new creatures, and the like. Before the PlayStation arrived, sharing creations wasn't quite feasible. It meant loaning your cartridge to a friend to check out, if the created track was even savable, or having them come over and try it since there really wasn't a way to show them without overwriting their save data. Then came along the PlayStation with its multiple memory card slots. Now, I could once again discuss Japan's superiority in this department, as they had create-your-own versions for almost every genre, including spaceship shooters. Instead, I'll focus on what it did for the American market. With save data being downloadable, transferable, and more importantly, exchangeable, the gaming community suddenly found itself with a fresh canvas and a world of possibilities. In the early days, this was merely used for basic game save data. People would physically mail memory cards back and forth for save files that had crazy unlocks, or custom sport team rosters. Interact Accessories saw this as a fresh way into the market and created the Dex Drive for both the N64 and the PlayStation. The little box allowed you to copy your saves and email them to each other, with no need to ever lend out your physical card again. Several games broke through the normal uses, so much so that the publication started picking up on it. Tips and Tricks began hosting an annual showing off of Armored Core mech creations, and EGM went so far as to have a contest for the best RPG created in RPG Maker. Sports communities started using them to update rosters, while other games allowed the players to collect and trade in-game items with each other. As an interesting side note, this creativity was not limited to just user input. It also applied to their very expansive disk libraries. Games like Monster Rancher, the Japanese internal section, and VibRibbon could create content from the games themselves. Both Japanese titles used the music to create levels on the fly, where no CD gave the same two results. The Monster Rancher series used them to create monsters in-game. The latter allowed Tecmo to be creative. If you used their own games, you could unlock themed monsters, like the football player gained from Tecmo Super Bowl. So long as it was a normal CD-ROM, any disc worked. Music CD, PlayStation CD, Saturn CD, blank CDR, it was an amazing time to create some monsters. These party tricks are still in play today, just in a new form, with games like Little Big Planet and Far Cry carrying the customizing torch, and Audio Surf and Beat Hazard containing the music CD options, just as an updated MP3 file. I'm so old. While we're on the subject of swapping, if you've walked into a video game store in the last 4 years, you've seen those crazy little toy figures from the Skylanders and Disney Infinity lines. Activision was the first on the scene with Skylanders, but, and this is true, this wasn't an original idea again. They once again borrowed from the Japanese PlayStation. Say hello to zxe-d, one of the greatest little-known games in the history of all things PlayStation. This mammoth package came with a game disc, a memory card port reader, and a whole lot of plastic pieces that assembled into 4 mighty robot models. Once assembled, the models were plugged into the reader and would appear on screen to be controlled by the user. Here's where it gets really funny. The game wasn't limited to just those 4 robots. Instead of buying more models, like in Skylanders, you could exchange parts from any robot with another robot. So if you wanted Robot A's torso with Robot B's arms and Robot C's legs, you could assemble it and it would appear as such in the game. So not only did the PlayStation beat Skylanders to retail, it beat Swap Force, and it did it better too. If you're thinking of trying to track this down, be careful. Make sure you do a whole lot of research to make sure your copy is complete. The game requires a lot of pieces, both plastic and accessory-wise. Not bad for a double-speed CD-ROM system, am I right? Alright guys, now in reality we really just scratched the surface of showing how Sony really set up the industry and how the PlayStation helped, form future events and so forth. But There is a fact that really didn't fit in with the video that I wanted to bring up to end this particular video. To understand just how important the PlayStation was to Sony and to gamers everywhere, the Sony PlayStation 1 is the only console in history to enjoy 20 consecutive years of backwards compatibility with the original media. No other system can say that. That's incredible. Now, while it's true the PlayStation 4 doesn't play PlayStation 1 games, who knows, maybe in 20 years I'll be doing a PlayStation 4 video that talks about how they added PlayStation 1 compatibility to the system when I'm 60.